Hello and welcome to another edition of GNAT-TV's In-Depth series. I'm Andrew McKeever, the news director here at GNAT-TV's News Project, and it's a pleasure to have you with us today. Today's Tuesday, December 4th, and it's also a pleasure to be joined here in the studio today by two folks who are here to talk to us a little bit about risk-taking and how it ties into adolescent brain development. Michael Nerney is a widely known and national consultant and lecturer on substance abuse prevention and education, and the former director of the Training Institute of Narcotic and Drug Research, Incorporated. Loree Zeif is a consultant and runs a co-owner and founder of the Elm Counseling in Manchester. She's been working in the field of counseling and therapy for almost 30 years, and it's great to have both of you with us today to talk about this important subject. Mike, let me start with you. You're here today to give a couple of talks up at Burton Academy. This morning you talked with a group of students up there, and this evening you'll be talking with a group of adults, their parents, other members of the general public. I assume anyone who might be interested can show up. I guess I was just wondering, could you tell us a little bit about what you talked to the students about and what you're planning to talk to the adults later on this evening?
Well, there's a core element that's the same for both. And one of the things I talk with the kids about is how remarkable and fascinating their brains are in terms of capability. But embedded in that tremendous capability are some vulnerabilities also. So you have this time of life between 12 and 24 where you have these billions of cells connecting, where you have this neuroplasticity, where you have the wonders of the whole world to explore out there, which is great, but you also have 2 to 4 times the amount of emotional intensity. And sometimes those emotions can drag them, you know, if they don't have the proper support at home, if they don't have a set of skills to deal with those emotions, it might drag them into the use of things like drugs and alcohol to try to medicate for those feelings. So I talk about them, how great your brain is, where it can take you, and what the risk factors are that'll all be within your choice. With the parents, it's still some of the core elements. You need to understand this about how your kids are growing and developing, but absolutely the focus is on, and you have to do your job at parenting them, that they cannot find their way through this by themselves. The more you know about this developmental phase, the better you are. But the same parenting characteristics that help raise generation after generation are still viable and still valuable. And sometimes I think in the new millennium, we've shuffled those aside for, just spend time on your electronic devices and everything will work out. So I want the parents to get back to full-time parenting. That's something that clearly has slipped by the wayside to some degree, I guess. It feels like that. What you're able to see. Mm-hmm. Huh, interesting. Loree, what are you seeing in this whole area here? I mean, as you work with families and counseling and everything, are you seeing adolescents taking on sort of unhealthy risks more frequently, or how is that playing out as far as you can tell?
I think what I'm seeing is adolescents who are choosing more unhealthy risks and less healthy risks at the same time. So I think there's a balance there that has really gotten a bit askew. And I think certainly drugs and alcohol are a part of that risk-taking behavior, but the screen thing, I think we cannot minimize enough. I think that what we're seeing is kids that are not out climbing mountains and doing things that are healthy and remembering how good it feels to climb a mountain, by the way. I mean, we're seeing kids who are much more motivated to stay home with the constant sort of Disneyland of the world, as I like to say, on a screen in front of them. So it's constant noise and music and colors, and it's immediate gratification. And that's very different than the ability to spend 2.5 hours climbing Mount Equinox. And I think that's a problem because when we think about brain development, we're not seeing children have the opportunity to problem solve, to fail and get over it, and that's what builds that resilience piece and that sort of ability to regulate their emotions piece in the brain. So I end up seeing in my office adolescents who are saying they have anxiety, depression, parents are worried, they're in their room all day, And I think part of it is parents are challenged by 2 full-time jobs and very busy lives and their own inability to put down their screens. Without a doubt, I think that's an issue. And so we end up with families that feel a little bit broken, with families that have all the best intentions, and I would say that I'm seeing this across socioeconomic and educational boundaries. Families that believe they have done everything right and have done a whole bunch of things right, but somehow we get to a point where children are old enough to let themselves into their house after school and sort of be on their own and do their own thing. And I guess the word that I would use that I think I am seeing with adolescents is a sense of alienation.
So I guess there's healthy risk-taking, and then there's the unhealthy risk-taking.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could tell us a little bit.
Well, it's really interesting. Something that we all experienced growing up ourselves or raising our children turns out to be true based on the research. So the University of Pittsburgh has some researchers that have discovered that there are, at about 13 years of age, a flood of new sites in the brain in one of the areas that's related to emotional reward, and it's tied to risk-taking. So it is natural and normal and probably makes sense in an evolutionary fashion. If someone wasn't taking risk, we'd all still be huddled around our fires outside the caves in the Great Rift, you know. But somebody needed to take the risk. So we know it's not some deviance and it's not some delinquency that gets kids into risk-taking. We know that they don't process risk the same way we do. And they don't think of the consequences first. What happens is they get emotional excitement from risk-taking and often a change in status among their peers. So I think it's really a bad idea to say, you know, we're going to eliminate risk-taking, which we hear sometimes, you know, from people. Instead, do what Loree talked about. Are there ways we can find that meet the risk-taking needs of kids, but are structured? Are there low ropes and high ropes courses? Or is there whitewater rafting? Is there performance? So, you know, you're up at the academy and you see that stage there, and some 14-year-old is going to come out and sing, you know, a song, do a solo at a play. That's an enormous risk to take, but carries with it this wonderful flood of chemistry that's going to give them this sense of reward and joy and elation. I think we have to reinstitute ways to help kids find legitimate risk-taking and let them take chances and let them find their way even when they make mistakes, because that's what they need. They do it anyway. And if we ignore it, then they're doing it online, or they're doing it in some car with alcohol and other drugs, or they're doing it sexually, or they're doing it shoplifting stuff, you know, at the mall. So we're not going to stop risk-taking because it's innate. But are we going to find ways to channel it? Are we going to find ways to support it that helps them grow and develop?
No magic silver bullets around that.
No.
It doesn't sound like.
Parental involvement and community involvement. You
right.
know, so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the other lines of discussions that have come up recently, as Vermont and many other states are considering legalizing or lessening the rules around marijuana possession, for instance, is that adolescent brains are changing and evolving at such a rapid pace. I mean, as you said, that period of life between 13 and 24, I mean, a lot of things going on, a lot of changes happening. And what I've read frequently is that the introduction of substances like marijuana or alcohol or other drugs alters that pattern of the natural pattern of development. And I wondered, how does that happen? I mean, how does that impact what would be the normal progression of a person's brain development?
I'll take a little bit of that.
Yep.
So there's a couple of things, and one of the things is that, you know, there's a huge range of normal when we say normal adolescent development.
That's kind of a bad word.
Yeah, no, it's fine as long as it's not this narrow track. You know, it's this pretty wonderful range, which is great. But we do know some things about that, and one of the things is that the earlier kids get into the use of drugs and alcohol, the more vulnerable their brains are to changing in a way that's not healthy, to becoming, to relying on the drug to solve emotional problems for them, or solve boredom for them, or suppress their anger. But what we know is that every time age of onset is a consideration, if you take 100 13-year-olds and they start using alcohol or drugs, we know that almost 43 out of the 100 will become have an addictive relationship to alcohol or the drugs that they're using, and 10 more will have episodic issues with that drug. So 53 out of 100 who start at 13 end up in serious trouble with whatever drug that is. Whereas if you can get them to 20, and that's not even legal, you know, but if you can get them to 20, then only 7 or 8 end up addicted to that drugs or to that alcohol, and 3 or 4 become episodically involved. So you have a difference of you know, 40% if you can delay that onset. And a lot of that has to do with the brain development. If you don't get to figure out a way to solve your emotional issues and repair your relationships and recover from the mistakes that you should be making as a kid, if instead it's always a drug or alcohol to suppress that problem, then you never acquire that set of skills. And this is the most wonderful time of the fluency of learning, how much your brain can learn now. And if you give that up, you know, because you don't want to challenge your brain or it's easier to take the drugs and alcohol, you never get back that opportunity to learn those skills with such, you know, unbelievable clarity. So I think it's a real dangerous issue.
And I think there are so many other factors that come into play if we think about parents and the community, and that is that it's not simply that they're starting to drink at 13 or 14 or 16 and that's the risk factor, because those same kids are often less involved with healthy relationships within their family. And if you live in a family where parents are showing you that the way that we celebrate is we drink, the way that we grieve is we drink, the way that we deal with anxiety is we drink, or smoke pot, increasingly I think is becoming more normal in families, we're not teaching our children how to manage those emotions and feelings in a healthier way. And so it's, when we look at those numbers, I think that there's the brain, all the things that you described so well. But in addition, when we look at the environmental pieces, there are a lot. And I say that to say, really what we want to do is go back behind the kid that starts drinking at 14 and look at why is he turning to alcohol? And oftentimes it's behaviors that he's mimicking from home or from the community where that's what the cool kids are doing, right? And I think it's hard to pull that piece of it out statistically and really, I guess I think it's a systems problem, not just the physical problem and not just the environmental problem.
I absolutely think you're right, and I think that sometimes in our field it's easy to pick one variable and say this is the reason, age of onset. But when you think about who's drinking before 13, what kind of family, you know, is involved in that, and what are the other characteristics, like Loree just said? Is it the role modeling? Is it the lack of attention? Is it the lack of supervision? Is it the dysfunctionality that's creating these heightened emotions? So it's never just that I start drinking at 13. It's like what's going on in that family constellation that produces that or promotes that. And so it is a bunch of things together. And
families really thinking about what would it look like if we had a celebration that didn't involve alcohol, and what message does that give to our kids, or didn't involve pot, as you know, as the family may go. But what would it look like if we talked about being sad together and it didn't involve cocktail hour? You know, I think we all certainly grew up in a time period where I think we thought a lot less about that stuff. That was what our parents did. But increasingly, I think we're in a place where our kids are interesting, like sort of more involved with us in ways that feels maybe not quite appropriate, and then less involved with us in ways that certainly the three of us would have grown up.
You know, a while ago in my own community, a husband and wife who I know were going to a wedding, and they were very happy about the wedding, and they said, and we're taking our 18-year-old daughter with us to drive us home from the wedding. So I said, why? And it was like, and they were proud that they weren't going to put the rest of the community at risk by driving home intoxicated. And I said, I kind of get that, but what I don't get is the message to your daughter that we can't go to a wedding and celebrate the marriage of our nephew without getting completely intoxicated. So much so that we have to pre-plan to have a driver. I'm not happy about that. You know?
Well, I think just culturally, when we think about alcohol, so that becomes acceptable, as does when we think about culturally what the sayings we find on cocktail napkins and dish towels, and I maybe shop in different places than you guys do, but there are women's Facebook pages. There is a lot about mommy sippy cup, having a wine date during a play date. I believe in white Christmas, but when the white runs out, red is good. This all becomes very, very acceptable, hanging in our kitchens and out on our tables. And this is what our kids are living with. And it becomes, I have friends my age who have suggested my husband and I go to their house before dinner so we can pregame. What does that mean? That means that we're gonna get a little tipsy before we go out to our dinner. That used to be, that was the highlight of the night. So I think really culturally, the drinking and the pot smoking has become very much a part of what we all do. And I am seeing a lot of women in my office, mostly mothers, who are saying, I drink every night. I don't know when I started drinking every night. I feel like I probably shouldn't drink every night. I'm not sure I want to stop drinking every night. And that's about the culture that has said, have a drink because you're making dinner, and phew, you're done with your day. And it becomes as normal as having a cup of coffee when you get up in the morning. So our kids are watching that happen, watching us walk in the door from work and immediately pour a glass of wine.
Well, what do you think has driven all that change? I mean, you know, is it just the pressure of work and life, and everyone's busy, and, you know, 5 o'clock comes around, you get home, it's okay to just relax and unwind after you've been going full tilt all day? Or is there other factors that are in play here?
So you got the science part of it, I got the anecdotal part, but you go. You say.
Well,
yeah.
When you were talking about those things you're seeing, the slogans, at first I thought you were in marketing for a while. You know? Because
they're everywhere.
Because I think that's a big part of it. I think that the industry, particularly the alcohol beverage industry, has done a remarkable job at marketing their product as, you know, distilled for 18 years in the Highlands of Scotland just for you, and that you deserve this, you know, and that when you have this beverage, all your life will get better. And I think they've done really, really well at that, including the products that they aim at young people. So you can buy, in some beverage stores, you can buy frozen cocktails that look like popsicles. They're called Cosmo Pops. And the ad that you see says 14.6% alcohol, 100% fun, give me some. You know? And then they say that's an adult ad. That's not an adult ad. You know, I don't remember the last time I went into a liquor store and said, give me some of those Cosmo Pops. That's an ad that's directing this product towards young people. They already have a ton of them that they've been very successful with their parents. And so I think that the industry's done really well. And I think social media promotes it.
Social media, yeah. And I think also we, certainly I am a part of this. Those of us that have raised children, that what we're calling the millennial generation, my oldest child is 28, and it was when he was a baby that juice boxes and mini packages of goldfish crackers and these things sort of evolved. We raised our kids in a world where immediate gratification of I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm thirsty, there is an expectation of that. And I think that the walking in the house and pouring the glass of wine, I actually think is a representation of that. I'm done with my day. This is how I relax. I'm thirsty. I have the juice box. I'm hungry. I have the crackers. Nobody has to wait for anything. When we were kids, our parents were telling us, well, dinner's in 2 hours, so get over it.
Go out in the yard and play.
We do not say that anymore to our kids. We say, you're hungry? Here, have a snack. And then we wonder why we're not seeing healthier behavior around eating even.
And the most recent study on alcohol consumption says clearly that no alcohol consumption is healthy. that the zero amount is the healthiest choice you can make, and the lower amount you can have is the thing that will give you the greatest health. Not that it doesn't help you, stay alive longer or stay healthier. It can certainly suppress your stress and your negative emotions, but it can't fix them, and it can create all these health risks for you.
Are there any suggestions in the time we have left here that you could make to say, well, what are some bits of information that you think people ought to know that would sort of help promote a healthier kind of development amongst kids? Or I mean, beyond just sort of saying, well, don't smoke pot or don't drink and all of that, just say no kind of thing, which I suppose works sometimes, but may not always. What's some of the advice that you might have to offer our viewers around how we can sort of fix some of this?
I have three things, because that's one of the questions I was given to prepare for this was three things. So one is healthy risk-taking. Get outside with your kids, in your community, do the 5Ks, climb the mountains, take out the kayaks, make the effort. That would be my first thing, and I think we're just seeing less of that. The other thing is argue, debate, be passionate, yell, scream, be respectful to each other within a family. We are in a world where the ability to have healthy debate, publicly or in a home, is really limited. And that is a risk-taking behavior that we want to improve. Absolutely. We want kids to be able to say, wait a minute, I don't agree with you, and tell me why, and be able to have a discussion. And then as parents, what we need to be mentoring for our kids is be able to be passionate right back, but be able to have an open mind and say, well, you're making a good point. I really didn't think about it that way. That's what I think we're seeing very limited ability for adolescents right now to be able to put themselves out there and not be the same kid that's all wearing the same clothes and all doing the same things. And thirdly, the biggest thing, the first thing that I say to families that come in with any kind of dissent is have dinner together. There are several studies now out that are saying clearly there's a clear, I won't say causation, but there is a clear correlation between the number of times families have dinner together and the ability for parents and children to have healthy communication as adolescents and young adults. And I will have, again, across socioeconomic and education boundaries, the best meaning parents come in and say, you just don't understand. This one's playing lacrosse, and this one's skiing, and we just don't have time, and dad works till 8 o'clock, and mom's working at home on the computer at night, and we don't have time. And I say this, I don't care if it's 10 o'clock and you're having a bowl of Cheerios. There is something about feeding each other, literally and figuratively, nurturing each other, looking at each other in the eyes and saying, I'd like to hear how your day was. That matters.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I very much like the part about having the debates, because while we don't ever want to encourage disrespect in our kids when they feel that their opinion is not the same as ours, we do want to encourage them to say, well, wait a minute, I don't agree with that, and here's why. We want to encourage that because A, it's great developmentally for them to acquire those skills, and B, at some point later on, when some other kid is saying, I think we should do this by crushing up these pain pills, the kid that's had the practice of saying, wait a minute, I don't agree with that, and here's why, has a way better chance of keeping himself and maybe some others out of that event. Whereas if they never get the chance to disagree, then the chance of them going along is really high. So A, allowing for that kind of behavior is critical. B, understanding that between 12 and 24, kids have 2 to 4 times more powerful emotions running through their brain, and that the last part that's going to develop is the prefrontal cortex, where they finally get to think about things before they do them. And that is not, disrespect or deviance or delinquency. It's normal development. So they're going to make mistakes, and we cannot be zero tolerance adults. Kids learn 2 ways: practicing and doing things, and making mistakes and learning from those mistakes not to make that mistake again. So we have to allow for that, and we have to have a set of consequences when we have a set of consequences. And the third thing is role modeling. How do you manage conflict? How do you handle stress? how do you deal with disappointment as a parent? Because that is what they're going to see. And how do you treat other members of the family, particularly your partner, particularly your spouse? How do you treat with them even when you're angry, even when you're in disagreement? Because what kids watch is for, even when my parents are in disagreement, do they respect each other? And we know from the research that when kids get that kind of upbringing, they're far more likely to make their way through this wonderful but dangerous time in a way that's healthy. So that's what we try to talk with them about.
And just the being able to argue respectfully and debate and with passion and all of that, I will say that if we bring that back to social media, a problem is many of us are out there with our political opinions. We're preaching to all the people that agree with us on our Facebook or Instagram or whatever it is, as are the kids. So the ability to sort of be your own person becomes really significantly different if everyone in your online world, which is primarily their world these days, is the same, has the same.
Yeah, that's your echo chamber then.
Yeah, exactly.
And not an opportunity to interact with somebody who has legitimate disagreements with your thought process or your conclusions. So I think it's critical.
Yeah. I find myself just wondering, what is the pathway out of all of this? I mean, it just seems like between cell phones and social media and all the other issues going on, it says, boy,
well,
what's the escape route?
Well, I don't know about the escape route, but I can tell you about an interesting study just completed on college students, where they had one group randomly assigned, one group of college students. You had to agree to follow the rules of the study. One group of college students could spend an unlimited amount of time on Snapchat and Facebook and Twitter and all of the social media platforms. And the other group pledged that they would in fact cut that time down to within probably 15 minutes for each platform per night. So 15 minutes on Twitter, 15 minutes on Snapchat, 15 minutes on whatever other sharing platform like Facebook. And that they every day they did an assessment of where they were emotionally in terms of mood states and sense of self and all that. And the group that limited their time on those devices had significant changes in how they felt about themselves, their place in the world, their accomplishments, their satisfaction with their lives, much higher levels across the board than the kids who continue to immerse themselves in those social media platforms.
Well, and part of that is, right, what are they doing with the time they're not spending scrolling through social media? Maybe they're picking up a book. Maybe they're going out for a hike. Yep. Maybe they're going skiing.
Maybe they're hanging out and talking.
Maybe they're looking at each other in the eye.
People that don't share the same opinions.
You know, my college daughter and her friends, because we were concerned about that. Every time we saw them, they were all on their phones. But by the time they were seniors, if they went out for dinner, like 6 of them, each one of them put their phone down.
Yep.
Whoever picked up the phone and turned it over paid for dinner. For everybody.
There you go.
And that was a really interesting thing because it'd be like buzzing and they would be like, but then they'd look at 6 meals. And so they would get through to the meeting. Look at what it does when you want to tell your college friends about my mom's really sick. And as you start, one of your dear friends says, oh, wait, I just have to text this thing. So it kills intimacy. Right. Yes. It kills, disclosure. It kills the things that bond you to each other because, you have to wait, hold on to that. I have to respond to this.
As does the numbing down of the emotions with pot or alcohol.
Sure. Exactly.
Worse. I think
exactly.
and that's so where I think we have to really be thinking about these unhealthy behaviors. It's not just the chemical substances. I think we're going to increase. Believe me, we haven't seen yet the kids who are 2 years old with iPhones in their hands. Yeah. I think we are seeing the tip of the iceberg with the screen thing.
Yeah. And when kids suffer from depression, they're 2 to 3 times more likely to turn to alcohol, marijuana, and pain pills to suppress it.
Okay. Well, we're going to have to leave it there for today, but I think we've just begun to scratch the surface of this.
I got a lot more time. Why don't we stay there?
I wish we did. It would be great to unpack all of this a lot further, but I guess we'll have to leave it there for today. But I want to thank again Michael Nerney and Loree Zeif for being here to talk with us today about this very important subject. And Mr. Nerney, I'm sure your conversation tonight with those parents will be intriguing,
Thanks
to say
for
the
having
least.
me, Andrew.
And thank you all for being with us today. It's been a pleasure to have you with us. We'll look forward to having you again the next time, and we'll see you then. Have a great day.